Do you remember the golden age of black music in the 1970s? When names like the OJs, the Stylistics, and the Emotions had all of America dancing, lost in the rhythm of soul, funk, and disco. But behind the glitter and the groove, something darker was stirring. A strange, almost cursed pattern seemed to shadow these legends. Just as their stars were burning brightest, tragedy struck, quietly, suddenly, and without warning. A van crash that ended a million-dollar dream. A plane accident that silenced a rising voice forever. Whole groups that disappeared after chilling, unexplained events. Were these heartbreaking losses merely coincidences? Or was there something far more mysterious lurking in the shadows of fame? Tonight, we pulled back the curtain and uncovered the hidden tragedies of 21 black music groups from the 1970s. Icons who rose to the heavens of fame, only to be brought down by fate in the most devastating ways imaginable. Boogie Nights Band, the crash that changed everything. When Boogie Nights lit up every dance floor in America in 1977, and always and forever became the heartbeat of every black wedding. Heat Wave seemed untouchable, pure joy set to music. But fate had other plans. In February 1979, just 2 years after their rise to fame, tragedy struck. Johnny Wilder Jr., the band's honey voice frontman and spiritual compass, often likened to a young Marvin Gaye, was driving through Dayton, Ohio after a show, his brother and girlfriend by his side. At the intersection of 3rd and Main, a delivery truck ran a red light, slamming into the driver's side at nearly 55 miles per hour. The crash left Johnny unconscious, his cervical spine shattered, his body paralyzed from the neck down. When he awoke in the ICU, doctors gave him the cruelest verdict imaginable. You'll never walk again, and you may never sing. But Johnny wasn't finished. Instead of asking why, he asked one simple question: can I still sing? The room fell silent, and sing he did, using only his chin, his lips, and the breath left in his lungs. Johnny Wilder Jr. composed songs, whispered melodies, and recorded soft hymns to keep his soul alive through the silence. For 27 years, he lived quietly, refusing replacements or pity. When he passed away in 2006, 2 unfinished songs remained on his desk, notes frozen in time, like a melody cut short midlife. The Bar-Kays. The Bar-Kays, the flight that never landed. If we had to begin with one story that defines both the rise and ruin of a dream, none is more haunting than that of the Bar-Kays. They were just a group of young men from Memphis, barely out of their teens, who had turned high school jam sessions into something extraordinary. Their breakout hit, Soul Finger, was a wild, electric burst of funk that needed no words to ignite a crowd. In 1967, they went from local heroes to sharing the stage with Otis Redding, the brightest soul star of the era. To play behind Otis wasn't just an honor. It was a dream too big to imagine. They hit the road with laughter in their lungs, instruments in hand, and futures that still felt endless. But that dream ended far too soon. On December 10th, 1967, as the plane carrying Otis Redding and members of the Bar-Kays approached Madison, Wisconsin, it lost control and plunged into the icy waters of Lake Monona. In a matter of seconds, the music stopped. There were no screams, no farewells, just silence. The crash claimed the lives of Otis Redding and 4 of the young Bar-Kays. Out of 8 people on board, only 1 survived: Ben Cauley, the group's trumpet player. When Ben awoke, he was clinging to a seat cushion in the freezing lake, his breath shallow, his chest on fire. His trumpet, the symbol of youth and hope, floated silently beside him. In the final seconds before impact, Ben remembered Otis reaching over, grabbing his hand without a word. There was something in that look, a silent promise, a desperate hold on life itself. By pure chance, Ben hadn't fastened his seatbelt. The very thing that should have killed him saved him. Back at the airport, James Alexander, the only Bar-Kay not on the flight, was waiting to pick up the group's gear. He noticed a crowd gathered by the terminal window, pointing toward the lake. When he followed their gaze, he saw black smoke rising from the frozen surface. He didn't know the details yet, But deep down, he knew his brothers were gone. Just 3 days before the crash, Otis had finished recording Sin on the Dock of the Bay. When the song was released, it felt less like a hit and more like a goodbye, a message from the other side. It became his first and only #1 single, a posthumous farewell that still echoes through time. In the wake of tragedy, the Bar-Kays disbanded. Years later, James Alexander rebuilt the band from its ashes, carrying the legacy forward. But every time they took the stage, one spot remained empty, a silent tribute to those who never made it home. The Sequence, one last hit and a silent coffin. The Sequence wasn't just a group, they were history in motion. The first all-black female group to ever put hip-hop on US radio. They broke barriers before the world even knew how to name them. But every legend has a final chapter, and theirs ended in tragedy, on a bloodstained night with no chance for goodbye. In March 2025, Angie Stone, the soul and thunder behind the Sequence, took the stage one last time. At 63, she still owned the room. That smoky, husky voice could still slice through the noise, her eyes burning with the wisdom of someone who'd lived through both applause and abandonment. The crowd roared as she belted out Funk You Up, the track that had made the Sequence the first female hip-hop group ever to chart on Billboard back in 1980. It was a moment drenched in nostalgia and unknowingly a farewell. After the show, Angie slid into a car, leaving downtown Atlanta. Just minutes later, at the intersection of Cascade Road and Benjamin East Mays Drive, fate struck hard. An SUV ran a red light, slamming directly into the passenger side where Angie sat. The impact spun the car into a lamppost. Inside, she was motionless, head against shattered glass, trapped in the wreckage. Rescue crews worked desperately for 20 minutes to free her. She was rushed to Grady Memorial Hospital, but the damage was irreversible. At 3:42 a.m., Angie Stone was pronounced dead. A ruptured aorta, severe chest trauma, and a broken legacy that the world wasn't ready to lose. The hip-hop community was in disbelief. At her funeral, Cheryl, the Pearl Cook, and Gwendolyn Blondie Chisholm, her sisters in rhythm and rhyme, stood over her casket, tears streaming down faces that once smiled under stage lights. On the lid lay a worn vinyl of Funk You Up and a black and white photo of the three of them in their prime. No one spoke of a reunion. No one dared to talk about legacy. Because for the Sequence, Angie's death wasn't just the end of life. It was the final beat of an era that changed hip-hop forever. A silence fell, heavy and permanent, one that time itself could never fill. The Fats Domino Band. The Fats Domino Band. The crash that silenced a generation of sound. They weren't just Fats Domino's band. They were the heartbeat of an era. The Fats Domino Band brought life to timeless hits like Blueberry Hill, Ain't That a Shame, and I'm Walking. Through the 1950s and 60s, their rhythm defined black rock and roll, soulful, raw, and deeply human. On stage, they were pure fire, a brotherhood bound by loyalty and sound, carrying the spirit of New Orleans to every corner of America. But on the rainy night of September 18th, 1970, that rhythm was shattered forever. After a performance in Baton Rouge, 6 members of the band climbed into a van, headed home to Slidell. The storm raged, the highway slick with rain, when a truck veered across Highway 190 and slammed into them head-on. The crash was catastrophic. Saxophonist Clarence "Sonny" Fields died instantly. His saxophone twisted and still pressed to his chest. 3 others were left clinging to life. Fats Domino, traveling separately that night, was crushed by the news. Friends say he sat in silence for hours, unable to speak. Whenever he mentioned Sonny in later years, his voice broke, his eyes filled with grief. On September 23, 1970, Sonny was laid to rest in New Orleans, his beloved saxophone buried beside him. The band would continue to play, but something had changed forever. Every night, the right side of the stage remained empty, an unspoken tribute to the man whose horn once carried their soul. The music went on, but the echo of that crash lingered, a haunting reminder of how one rainy night stole the harmony of a generation. KC and the Sunshine Band, the tragedy behind the groove. In the glittering disco era of the 1970s, KC and the Sunshine Band made the world move. With hits like Get Down Tonight and That's the Way, I Like It, their infectious rhythms lit up dance floors and defined a generation. But behind those joyful horns and shimmering lights was Jerome Smith, the group's quiet genius. The man whose crisp, funky guitar gave their sound its heartbeat. Then came July 28, 2000, a day that silenced that rhythm forever. Jerome was working at a construction site in West Palm Beach, Florida, operating a bulldozer. In a tragic twist of fate, he fell from the cabin and was crushed beneath its massive wheels. He died instantly at just 47 years old, a guitar legend reduced to a line in a labor report. But his death wasn't just a cruel accident. It was the final note in a song of injustice. Years earlier, Jerome had walked away from the band after bitter royalty disputes left him without his rightful share of the profits from reissued albums. 6 months before his death, he wrote a desperate letter pleading for medical assistance. No one ever responded. When his body was found, his occupation was listed simply as manual laborer. The loss shattered the band. KC and the Sunshine Band stopped performing for nearly 2 years. And even when they returned, Jerome's recorded solos were never replaced. Out of respect, no one dared to touch them. Many fans believe that when Jerome fell, the band's true soul fell with him. The music never sounded quite the same again. The Temptations, the bullet without an explanation. The Temptations weren't just a band. They were a force that defined the soul of Motown. With timeless hits like My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, and Papa Was a Rolling Stone, they didn't just sing. They commanded the stage with military precision and choreography as sharp as a knife. But behind the synchronized smiles and velvet harmonies was a story steeped in pain and loss. At the center of it all was Paul Williams, the group's co-founder and its steady heartbeat. His warm baritone voice and quiet strength gave the Temptations their soul. Yet, on August 17, 1973, that heartbeat fell silent. Paul was found dead in his car in a lonely Detroit parking lot. A gunshot wound to his head, a revolver in his hand, and a half-empty bottle of liquor by his side. Police called it suicide, but the details didn't add up. There were no fingerprints on the gun, no suicide note, and no clear reason why a man who helped build Motown's empire would meet such a lonely end. Behind the tragedy lay a cruel truth. Paul had been pushed out of performances due to failing health and worsening alcoholism. Despite his role as a founding member, he received less in royalties than his bandmates. By the time of his death, he was living in a small rented home in East Detroit, trying to sell the recording Feel Like Giving Up just to cover his wife's medical bills, a haunting reflection of his reality. After Paul's passing, the Temptations would never again reclaim the golden lineup that once made history. To Motown fans, Paul Williams wasn't merely a singer. He was the soul's silent soldier, the man who gave everything, only to be remembered as the heartbeat that faded too soon. The Dramatics, the contract that was never fulfilled. The Dramatics were once the very sound of soul itself, the masters of heartbreak, harmony, and pain. Songs like In the Rain and What You See Is What You Get made them legends, blending smoothness with raw emotion like no other group could. But on one stormy July night in 1975, fate took a cruel turn that would change everything. As their tour bus rolled out of Indianapolis toward Chicago for one of the biggest shows of their career, the rain came down in sheets. The roads shimmered slick under the headlights, and a young driver, barely weeks into the job, lost control on a winding stretch. The bus skidded, tilted, and slammed into a concrete pillar. In an instant, the laughter, the music, the dream, all drowned in chaos. Inside the wreckage, panic echoed. L.J. Reynolds, the voice that once soared effortlessly, suffered chest injuries that stole his high notes for nearly 2 years. Willie Ford broke his hip and was confined to a wheelchair. Their manager slipped into a coma. Miraculously, no one died, but something inside the group did. A piece of their youth, their unity, and their sound was left behind on that rain-soaked highway. Tragically, just hours before the crash, they had signed a performance contract with Isaac Hayes worth over $100,000, a dream 7 years in the making. After the accident, the label shelved their next album. The press barely noticed. Silence swallowed the dramatics. It would take 3 long years before they found the courage to step back on stage. But when they did, loyal fans could feel it. Their harmony was still beautiful, but the magic had... The Dells, the man who came back to life in a body bag. In the 1970s, the Dells were no longer topping the charts, but their harmonies still echoed through black communities across the Midwest. Their soulful ballads about love and heartbreak spoke to generations. But on one cold, rain-soaked night in March 1970, tragedy nearly silenced them forever. After a late show in Milwaukee, their tour bus skidded on a sheet of ice along a 94 and slammed into a concrete barrier. The vehicle flipped in the darkness. Sound equipment crashed forward, crushing the back seats. The driver was killed instantly. 3 members were critically injured. Rescue teams didn't arrive for nearly 40 minutes. Too late, too slow, because the wreck happened in a mostly black neighborhood that emergency crews often ignored. Among the wreckage was Michael McGill, the group's deep, resonant bass voice. He was found motionless, without a pulse. A young white intern pronounced him dead without checking twice. His body was zipped into a bag and sent to the morgue. But 5 hours later, as a nurse prepared to identify him by his dental records, she unzipped the bag, and McGill suddenly gasped for air. He was alive, but for 3 weeks, he didn't remember his name, his music, or the group that had become his family. The Dells canceled all tours for the next 5 years and never performed in Milwaukee again. Every future contract carried one haunting clause: only use familiar drivers. They rarely spoke about that night, but everyone in the group knew its meaning. Survival for them wasn't just luck, it was defiance. A declaration that black lives cannot be erased, even when the world tries to forget them. The OJs, the broken mirror backstage. In 1973, the OJs were unstoppable. Backstabbers ruled the Billboard charts, and Love Train became an anthem of black pride and unity. They were on top of the world, untouchable, unshakable, believing they could control every note, every mile, every moment. So they did it all themselves. No chauffeurs, no managers, just 3 men, the open road, and their destiny. But destiny had other plans. On a rainy night, September 14th, as their car descended a slick slope on Interstate 76, control slipped away. The vehicle spun sideways, flipped, and scraped across nearly 80 meters of wet asphalt. Inside that chaos, William Powell was crushed between seat frames, unable to move. Walter Williams struck his head and went limp. Only Eddie Levert walked away, his body untouched, but his soul shattered. Because Eddie had been behind the wheel. He wasn't supposed to be driving. He'd switched seats for fun. When the record label heard, they rushed to bury the truth, pushing police to list an unnamed technician as the driver. They couldn't risk scandal, not with a brand new $500,000 CBS contract on the line. Eddie never confirmed nor denied it. He just stopped driving. From that night on, he always rode in the back seat, silent. William Powell lived, but his gift did not. His once golden voice grew faint, the high notes gone, the lyrics forgotten mid-song. On stage, he faded into the shadows, harmonizing softly behind the curtain. In 1977, when cancer finally claimed him, the show went on in Baltimore that very night. No farewell, no moment of silence, just another performance for the crowd. But backstage, Eddie Levert stood alone before the dressing room mirror. For a long time, he just stared at his own reflection, then drove his fist through it. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. And in that silence, everyone understood. Some wounds never heal. Some reflections, once broken, never look the same again. The Spinners, the fall from a 9-foot height. In 1974, the Spinners were untouchable. With hits like I'll Be Around and Then Came You, they weren't just chart toppers. They were the heartbeat of American soul. Every note, every harmony felt like gold. But one night in late October at Philadelphia Spectrum Theater, that golden era came crashing down, literally. While performing one-of-a-kind Love Affair, lead singer Bobby Smith took a step he had done 1,000 times before. The crowd was screaming, the band was electric, and then silence. No one knew the rear stage platform had been removed for lighting setup. In a single misstep, Bobby fell backward into a 9-foot pit. There was no scream, just a dull, terrifying thud that silenced the room. For nearly 10 seconds, the music kept playing until Eddie and the others realized Bobby was gone. When they reached him, he was unconscious. His spine was shattered, his right leg numb. He was rushed to the ER with life-threatening injuries, spending 6 weeks in a hospital and almost a year in grueling physical therapy. The cruelest blow came later. The event organizers refused to cover his medical bills, claiming stage liability didn't apply. The Spinners were forced to cancel 17 tour dates, losing nearly $200,000. But money wasn't the real loss. Bobby's voice, that soaring, velvet sound that had defined their magic, was never the same. He needed help just to walk down stage steps again. From that night on, every time the lights dimmed, the Spinners would glance behind them, haunted by that fall, as if it never truly ended. The Chi-Lights, a cheap rental, a shattered voice, and a legacy scarred forever. In the mid-1970s, the Chi-Lights reigned as Chicago's soul royalty. Their timeless anthem, Have You Seen Her, floated through every radio across the Midwest, a love song that seemed untouchable. But fame offers no protection from fate. On a cold November night in 1976, their dream came crashing down, literally. The band was on the road to Cleveland in a cheap rental van with no official plates when slick rain turned deadly. The van spun across I-71, flipped, and hurled Marshall Thompson from the front seat. His head smashed into the windshield. A shard of glass slashed his right eye, cutting his vision by nearly half. Then came the cruelest blow. The insurance company refused to pay, claiming the rental paperwork was incomplete. 12 shows canceled, over $70,000 in medical bills, and a frontman forever changed. From that day on, Marshall wore dark glasses, not as a fashion statement, but to hide the eye that never stopped weeping. Each time he sang, Have You Seen Her? The tragedy was literal. He could no longer see the audience he was calling to. Earth, wind, and fire when the light fell. Earth, wind, and fire weren't just funk legends. They were architects of sound, light, and spirit. Theirs was music that could lift a crowd straight into the heavens. But one summer night in June 1975, during a concert in Denver, the light that once lifted them nearly destroyed them. As the band burst into Shining Star, a massive 18 kDU light fixture snapped loose from the ceiling and came crashing down, striking Philip Bailey Square on the left shoulder. The music stopped. The crowd froze, then screamed. In Bailey's trembling hand, the golden microphone dripped with his own blood, glittering onto the stage lights. Doctors managed to save his arm, but the damage was permanent. Bailey had to relearn how to lift, how to move, how to perform. Even today, he can't raise his left hand above his shoulder. From that night on, every Earth, Wind, and Fire show has a hidden mic stand, a silent guardian beside the stage. That same gold microphone, still marked with dry blood, remains sealed in their studio. Maurice White once said, "We kept the wound to remind us. Our voice was nearly taken. Not by time, not by silence, but by falling light." The Commodores, the fall that silenced the keys. No one ever imagined that a single misstep could end the music. But that's exactly what happened to the Commodores in July 1978, just weeks after Three Times a Lady soared to the top of the Billboard charts. During a stage change in Texas, keyboardist Milan Williams stepped onto an unfinished platform and plunged nearly 5 feet on a jagged iron flooring. The crowd never saw it, but behind the curtain, chaos erupted. His wrist was shattered, ligaments torn, blood pooling beneath the spotlight. 54 stitches and 1 emergency surgery later, Milan's hand would never play the same again. The man who once made keys sing could no longer solo or keep rhythm. When Lionel Richie began his rise as a solo superstar, Milan quietly slipped away from the band. No farewell concert, no headlines, just silence. Years later, in one of his few interviews, he said, "They called it an accident, but to me, it felt like a goodbye without a signature." The Manhattans, the fall that derailed the tour. The Manhattans, icons of soul, known for timeless ballads like Kiss and Say Goodbye, carried themselves on stage with the grace of a slow-motion black-and-white dream. But one warm August night in 1976, in Cleveland, that dream turned into a nightmare. As the band began performing Shining Star, a brand-new fog machine misfired, flooding the stage with a thick, ghostly mist. On the lyric, "This has got to be the saddest day," lead singer Gerald Alston stepped forward and vanished into the haze. In an instant, he plunged nearly 6 feet into a technician's pit below. The crowd gasped, then applauded, believing it was part of the show. But under the blinding stage lights, Gerald lay unconscious, the music still playing above him. He survived with a concussion, but something inside him broke that night. His confidence shattered. He stayed off stage for 8 long months, forcing the group to cancel over 20 shows. From that day forward, the Manhattans made one rule clear: no fog, no haze, only golden light. Because one artificial mist had left a very real scar on their legacy. The Stylistics, a burnt suit and a lingering shadow. If the Manhattans were haunted by fog and fate, then the Stylistics were cursed by rain and cruel timing, just when joy had finally returned after years of struggle. This romantic soul group from Philadelphia, blessed with Russell Tompkins Jr.'s angelic falsetto, once melted hearts with classics like You Make Me Feel Brand New and Betcha by Golly Wow. But in 1977, tragedy brushed too close. While traveling on an interstate tour, their van skidded across a rain-slicked highway and smashed into a guardrail. One member fractured his pelvis. The others were pinned inside for half an hour, terrified and silent, as stormwater poured in through shattered glass. No one died that night, but something inside them broke. When the smoke cleared, an amplifier had toppled, setting fire to their brand-new stage suits, the first they'd bought in 5 long years of scraping by. Watching those dreams burn felt like a cruel omen. The tour was canceled, their label cut promotion, and slowly, the Stylistics faded from the American spotlight. That rainy night became their unspoken wound, a memory they never revisited, yet one that forever lingered in the shadows of their music. The Delonics, a swerve that changed everything. The Delonics, Philly's golden soul pop sensation, once ruled the airwaves with velvet harmonies and heartbreak anthems like Lemin's I Love You and Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time. Dubbed the Black Beatles, they embodied class, rhythm, and tenderness like no one else. But on one fateful night in September 1977, the magic nearly ended in tragedy. After a sold-out show at the Spectrum Arena, the band's van sped off under a light drizzle, chased by 2 paparazzi on motorcycles. As the flashbulbs pierced the rain and headlights blurred the road, their driver swerved sharply to avoid a collision on the Benjamin Franklin Bridge. The van skidded sideways, screeched against the guardrail, and stopped just inches from plunging into the river below. Wilbur Hart was hurled forward, fracturing his collarbone and splitting his forehead open, blood soaking through his still sparkling stage suit. Touring came to an abrupt halt. For 6 long months, a strict gag order kept the accident buried in silence. From that night on, the Delonics never left a venue after dark without a police escort. The near tragedy became a haunting turning point, one that dimmed their once blinding glow forever. The Ohio Players, 90 minutes in the dark. They were the kings of funk, the Ohio Players, masters of grooves like Fire and Love Roller Coaster. Known for their bold sound, sizzling shows, and sweat-soaked energy, they could set any stage ablaze. But one icy winter night in 1974, that fire nearly went out. Before a concert near the Met Center in Minneapolis, 3 members stepped into an elevator on their way to the green room. At that exact moment, a brutal blizzard ripped through the city, snapping power lines and plunging the building into total darkness. The heat died, the ventilation stopped, temperatures dropped below freezing. Trapped in pitch black for 90 agonizing minutes, the band members banged on the steel doors, their breath turning to frost. Staff assumed they'd taken another exit, unaware their stars were suffocating in silence. Clarence Satchel reportedly lost consciousness from lack of oxygen and spent 3 days in isolation afterward. It was one of the only times in their career the Ohio players canceled a show. From that night on, they refused to use old elevators and always brought their own tour monitor. Proof that it wasn't fire, but cold, that almost stopped the hottest funk band in America. The main ingredient, the rain that stole their leap. In 1972, the main ingredient soared to soul music royalty with their timeless hit, Everybody Plays the Fool. It seemed nothing could stop their rise. But fate had other plans. On a cold, rainy night, November 22nd, 1973, the group wrapped up rehearsal at the Count Basie Theater in New Jersey. They were headed to their next gig in Newark, driving down Route 35 in their brown Dodge. The rain poured harder, the road slick as glass. Out of nowhere, a military truck veered into their lane without warning. The Dodge spun, skidded off the road, and flipped into a ditch. Miraculously, no one was killed, but lead singer Tony Sylvester suffered a brutal blow to the neck, leaving him with chronic nerve pain that benched him for 3 long months. The military driver fled the scene. Because he was on active duty, the case was quietly swept under the rug. No charges, no compensation, no justice. The band missed their Radio City Music Hall performance just 3 days later and lost a promising CBS television deal for spring 1974. Years later, the members would look back and call it the rain that stole our leap, the storm that robbed them of the momentum they'd worked their whole lives to build. The Emotions, a stage accident that changed everything. In the mid-1970s, the Emotions were the very definition of grace and harmony. 3 sisters whose angelic voices and radiant presence made audiences swoon. But behind the elegance and soul-stirring melodies of Best of My Love lay a story of pain and resilience few ever knew. On June 14, 1975, at the Baton Rouge Municipal Theater in Louisiana, the trio took the stage dressed in flowing white silk gowns, glowing like goddesses under the spotlight. The crowd roared as they opened with So I Can Love You. Then disaster struck. A side stage platform gave way, and a 20-kilogram Fresnel light came crashing down from nearly 4 meters above, slamming into Sheila Hutchinson's right shoulder. The impact cracked her bone, but the show didn't stop. Bound by contracts and driven by passion, Sheila powered through the pain, performing night after night on painkillers. The group quietly reworked their choreography to hide her injury from fans. It wasn't until a backstage interview with Jet magazine in July 1976 that the truth finally came out. That incident changed the game. The Emotions became the first female soul funk act to demand their own stage engineer and to ban prefabricated stage rigs, setting a new precedent for artist safety in live music. The Pointer Sisters, the day fate took a turn. The Pointer Sisters were known for their fearless energy and genre-bending brilliance, blending jazz, soul, rock, and disco into pure magic. But on one quiet Sunday morning, fate nearly silenced their rise. On March 5, 1978, the sisters were on their way to the Oakland Black Family Benefit Concert, a charity event to uplift underprivileged black children. Their driver cruised down East 14th Street when, without warning, a fire truck from Station 18 made a sharp U-turn responding to an emergency. There was no time to stop. The vehicles barely collided, but the impact was devastating. Ruth Pointer, unbelted in the front seat, slammed into the windshield. Her left cheek split open. 6 stitches that would forever mark the moment fame almost slipped away. She missed 2 weeks of performances and a Soul Train taping that could have been their biggest breakthrough of the year. From that day on, the Pointer Sisters vowed never to take chances again, traveling only with family or trusted drivers, double-checking every insurance policy, and championing safety for Black performers on the road. That crash didn't just change their tour schedule. It changed their mindset. A stark reminder that for Black artists, success often comes with unseen risks. We've just revisited 21 stories nearly lost to time. Tales of triumph, tragedy, and resilience. If one moment moved you, or one name still lingers in your heart, share your thoughts below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because behind every spotlight lies a story the world was never meant to forget.